I've got too many bills.
If you need funds, you can apply in minutes at cashnetusa.com and have the money in your account as soon as the same business day.
Okay, got it. Applying now.
They've been helping hardworking people cover emergency expenses since 2004.
Hey, look, I got it.
You've got this.
When you need money fast, be the hero. All loans subject to lender approval. Speed of funding is subject to verifications and your bank's processing times. See cashnetusa.com for more details.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Illustration Department podcast. My name is Giuseppe Castellano. In this podcast, I talk to folks in illustration, graphic design, publishing, animation, and other creative fields about their work, the lessons they've learned, and the bumps and bruises they've experienced along the way. In this episode, my guest is artist and illustrator Marc Burckhardt. Illustrators and podcasters often feel anxious and unsure about their work. As Marc and I discuss, anxiety isn't necessarily a bad thing. Among the topics, Marc and I answer a doubtful illustrator's question about real opportunities in the industry. We discuss how generative AI is a degradation of the making and perception of art. And Marc shares what talent really is among illustrators and podcasters. I hope you enjoy our conversation. I work with quite a few editorial illustrators, and one concern they share with me is that it seems impossible to be a traditional painter in the editorial world. It takes too long. Yeah. So they think. Of course, yes. That's not true, as you and fellow podcast guests, CF Payne, Anita Kunz, and others have proven. How do you work the way you work in this classical, Dutch school-inspired, iconographical, layered in both media and storytelling way, and still manage to meet short deadlines?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a couple of things. First of all, I actually don't do that much editorial work. The first 10 years of my career, I was doing nothing but books, 95% book covers. And at this point, I do mostly, within illustration, I do mostly product and brand related stuff. Right. So I don't do editorial all that often, but I'm a fast painter. I work in what I always describe as a modified version of an old master's technique. So my sort of favorite genre within the history of art is the sort of the Flemish masters, and that was sort of a period at the introduction of oil painting. So a lot of them were doing their underpainting with egg tempera, and then they would come in with glazing with oils, and bringing colors in. So working with egg tempera primarily monochromatically, and I sort of do the same thing, but instead of egg tempera, I'm using acrylic. So I'm building up paintings very fast.
Right. Well, with the price of eggs and stuff, I mean, that's a pretty smart move.
Exactly.
Sorry. I had to.
But it's, I couldn't miss it. But so my technique, there's pretty much, I would say, anything is possible in a 2 to 3 day window of time to paint.
Wow. Okay.
For me, I always feel, and I think most artists feel this way. I don't know, maybe some of them don't, but I feel like all the heavy lifting happens in the sketch stage. Definitely. So once you've got that approval on the concept, on the what's inside your work, then the execution of it is a relatively quick process.
Right.
But of course, it depends on how complex the image is.
Well, I mean, you've worked with other kinds of clients in luxury brand, automotive, cultural, advertising, periodical, not as much as I had assumed, but you still did do that stuff. Publishing, obviously, all of these other sectors. You've exhibited in galleries, you've taught in higher education. Your practice as an illustrator is far-ranging. In order to establish a practice, do you think we're now at a point at which it's no longer an option to diversify, but a requirement?
I feel like in some ways I'm not well suited to answer that question because I'm at further down the road in my career. If I were thinking about what I might do if I were 20, right, I'm sure I would have an entirely different picture of what I was going into. So for me, I think it's been a really weird and at the same time very natural evolution from from one market sector to the other. As I say, I started out working a lot in books, and then at some point, my style crystallized in a way that I started suddenly doing a lot of editorial. And strangely enough, I was doing a lot of portraiture. I had never done any portraits, and then I suddenly became the portrait guy for a long time. And combination or in conjunction with my doing sort of pushing gallery work a lot more into my space, I started to get much more branding related stuff. So it kind of evolved. I still get a pretty broad range of things, but I don't know that I would say that my advice would be to diversify. I think the main thing is you have to find your voice. You have to figure out what it is you want to say and how you say it, and don't build firewalls between your personal work and commissioned work. And that's probably the best way for you to stand out from a broad crowd of people.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen a portfolio, whether it's digital or physical, and the official work looks like X. And then on the side, there's either a page of studies or sketches or a sketchbook, and the work in there is far more interesting.
Yeah.
And then I'll point it out and go, what the hell is this? Oh, well, that's just, that's just like some cut paper collage stuff that I just do for fun. And I'm like, your shapes are better, your colors are better, your compositions are better. This is far more interesting. Why isn't any of this in your official narrative art?
And what's more, that piece exudes joy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really true. I mean, I think without getting, metaphysical or whatever, I think if you do a piece of art that you love and that you love making, people feel it. I mean, they're drawn to it. I know it's a scary thing. I remember, so I went to Art Center a million years ago, and a lot of the people that were going there sort of had a focus on entertainment industry or advertising.
Right.
I remember somebody talking about, they'd shown their portfolio to someone, that had I think handled Coca-Cola, and they had some piece in their portfolio that had a Pepsi in it, and they were like, well, that's great, but can you do a Coke? It was just so narrow cast and so anticipatory of what the client wants. And I think that's the death of any good art, is to be thinking about what does somebody else want. I think you have to be making stuff that you love and that you care about. Obviously, there's subject matter that's relevant to people outside of your own head, but the overwhelming majority of clients that come to me for work that is personal work is the thing that's drawn them in.
Exactly.
In a lot of ways, I'm much more in charge of my career than I was at the beginning, because people come to me for what I do and for my brand. So my brand enhances their brand.
Yeah, I feel like this is something I've been thinking a little bit about of late. The different kinds of illustration instruction that are out there. When you have conversations daily with illustrators around the world, you hear different kinds of experiences. They've gone to other places to get some instruction, or they'll share with you some advice or something a teacher has said to them in the past. It all kind of, not to reduce this down to like two buckets, but it really, for now, I'm still thinking about this, and maybe one day I'll write something about it. But right now, to me, it feels like it all fits into two buckets. Bucket one are the instructors who encourage illustrators to be as creative as they want to be, to do what it is that they want to do. Not to focus on the what, but the how and the why. Then the other bucket is the what. And the second bucket is more limited. Those instructors will tell illustrators what not to do. Yeah. The first bucket, and I'd like to think I'm in the first bucket, that first bucket are instructors who tell illustrators, here are the possibilities. Here's what you could do if you wanted to.
I definitely feel like I'm a first bucket guy. I taught for many years. I taught at School of Visual Arts.
Right.
I taught at Texas State as well, and I do workshops. And I always told my students that this is my volunteer work. I'm doing this one night a week. I'm taking time away from the studio, so I'm losing money. Bring your game to this class. Yes. And I also tried to give them very practical parameters around assignments. So I would give them actual assignments in a sector, and I would even have them invoice me for projects when they would bring in the finish. and we do group crits, and so you're learning to explain and define what you're doing. So a lot of practicalities. The core of that was you need to learn how to express yourself the way you express yourself. And so, yes, here's a problem, but how would you solve this problem? Right. And then being able to verbalize that too. I think I probably learned more from teaching than my students did in that respect, because, I'd been working for many years more or less intuitively. I had my process. I had my way of solving problems, and, that too is like, I don't know where they come from, but the more you practice, the luckier you get. But still, when you have to sit down and explain a set of sketches or present, send your sketches to an art director and give them talking points, that process, or explaining to students, basic aspects of illustration and art making, it teaches you how to verbalize. And for most of us, we're not verbal people, we're visual people.
Right.
So it's striking that balance between sort of, here's the sort of more or less the way the world works in terms of commissioned work and being in a collaborative space, but ultimately your goal is to have as much freedom as possible. I always make that analogy that you don't go to the doctor with a broken leg and say, I don't like my nose. Can we do a nose job? You come to somebody because they've got an expertise, and you need to respect that expertise. But at the same time, as the doctor, you need to be listening to your patient.
Yeah.
I don't know if that really answers the question or not, but
I don't even know if there was a question, to be honest. I guess the other thing I'm thinking about, kind of going back to diversifying and possibilities, it makes sense to me to establish a primary goal. Like, I want to be a children's book illustrator. Great. And then augment that with 2 or 3 or more secondaries. Exhibiting galleries, sell prints and products, tap into a monetization platform like Substack or Patreon, establish clients in other industries, private commissions, whatever. I guess the question is, why not do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you ought to be looking for as many avenues as possible. What comes first is finding your voice, what drives you, what gets you excited, the kinds of subject matter, your approach to work. And once you've got that, the rest is just finding out where that fits in the marketplace, right? Rather than finding a marketplace first and then going, oh, what do they need? That's never turns out well.
I often say this. I say this on the podcast. I say this to illustrators that I mentor: find your voice, and it's good. It's good advice. However, it's one of those pieces of advice that if I were an illustrator trying to make my way,
you'd be annoyed.
I'd be fucking annoyed, dude.
Yeah, I absolutely understand it. I truly do. When I was teaching, one of the assignments I would do, the very first night, is I would ask them to, when you come back next week, the first night's always here are the rules of the road night.
Right.
And so I'd give them an assignment, I'd tell them, give them a lot of information, but one of the things I would ask them to do for that next class was to bring in 3 to 4 examples of art, just a piece of art that you like, just something that really moves you. And it was always an interesting experiment, because, you get this incredible range of stuff. A kid, would bring in an abstract painting and then some, comic thing, and then something else. And when you asked them, to explain why you picked these pieces, they were kind of surprised at, they weren't able to explain what it was entirely that drew them to these pieces. But if you kind of asked the right questions, you'd see in this one, the concept really moved me. And in this one, I just loved the technique. It was really cool. And in this one, the color, those kinds of realizations, it's sort of like a magician, right? I mean, you can go and you can see a magician. And if you're also a magician, you're looking at them and you're seeing how they're doing the trick. But if there's a trick in that show that you're suddenly you're taken away and out of your magicianness and are just blown away by you're actually in the moment of magic, that's the thing that's really going to stand out for you. Then you go back as a technician and go, why, how? Right. And I think that's what you have to teach artists, young artists, I think, is to have that magic experience and then break it down and understand it, because you're going to take pieces from this person and take pieces from that person that are very different from each other.
Right.
And students tend to get really caught up in technique and style, and it's like there's more motivating you here than that.
Right. I think find may not even be the right word. Discover.
Yeah. Yes.
Your style. Like, it's there. You just have to peel away all the instruction and all the assumptions of what you should be doing or what other people tell you to do. It's underneath all of that.
Yeah. And what's crazy is when you, I do talks occasionally about my work, and my presentation is largely is exactly on the subject of finding your voice. And it's largely sort of presented as, I start out with drawings I did as a kid. Through various examples, I show, it's so easy when you look backwards at your career. You're like, of course I'm painting this way, and of course I'm solving these kinds of problems and solving them this way. It's so obvious looking backwards, but it's of course impossible to do the same looking forwards.
Right.
But it's at least it's a roadmap that helps you understand that, as you said, you discovered yourself. It was always there.
Yeah. An illustrator recently shared with me how they doubt that there are as many, in their words, real opportunities in the illustration industry as people like me and others have said there are. Okay, I found my voice. Awesome. Now what? Right? So it's that sort of thing. And I see it time and again.
Into the wilderness with it.
Yeah, exactly. I see it a lot. I see it with mentees. They get work, they establish themselves, and they're off and running. I received an email this week. This is a true story from a recent mentee who sold her first children's book. She had her doubts it would ever happen, and it happened.
Yeah.
And now she has an agent, and she's off. Yeah. I hear it from agents and art directors. They're busier than ever. There are opportunities out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the doubtful illustrator's concerns are valid.
Yeah, it's the nature of what we do and the way we do it, that you spend enormous amounts of time by yourself in a space questioning what you're doing. Yep. And so it's natural to feel alone in certain moments, and when you're starting out, that can lead to a lot of anxiety and like, where do I go and how do I find things, and is anybody noticing what I'm doing? And of course, you've got to build that fire. As they say, don't hide your light under a bushel. You've got to get it out there, and you got to let people know that it's there. Right. But in terms of opportunity, I was telling you earlier, I've listened to a few of these podcasts and lots of folks I know. But Greg Manchess, I think, said that, and it was exactly the same for me. I think we may have started roughly around the same time in the field, but back then, people were saying, "Oh, it's over. The good old days of illustration are gone. It's an impossible business," and I think it's always been that way, that people encounter something later in their career and say, well, back when I was starting, it was this. So now that it's not that anymore, then it's done. It's dying. And it's like, no, it's thriving. It's alive. I feel super fortunate. I'm as busy now as I ever was. I'm able to be, I think, much more selective about what I want to do. I think that's a very good thing too. That's a very luxurious place to be. But I think there's an enormous amount of work out there in the world, and and in a lot of ways, the world is a flat one compared to the one that I entered the field. When I came out of school, I sold a handful of things I weren't nailed down, and moved to New York City because that's kind of what you had to do. The mountain was not going to come to Muhammad.
This was the early 90s.
This was 89.
Okay.
And so I think in that respect, I work with people all over the world. Nobody even knows where I am and doesn't care. It's just about the project.
Yeah.
More importantly, it's about the work. It's about the work that you've done that's drawn them to you. And so I think in that respect, there's more opportunities. There's an entire world of opportunity instead of, one city or one region of opportunity.
Yeah. it is valid. It's like, I don't know, I guess when in the 40s and 50s and 60s when photography started, getting more of a foothold in the editorial space, I wondered if Norman Rockwell was sitting there going like, shit, am I out of a job? Maybe
Absolutely.
not. Maybe at that point in his career, he was like, I'm good. I'm still Norman Rockwell. But maybe other illustrators who were getting going in the editorial space were like, well, why should I start? There's something called photography everyone's using.
Right.
And then there's that seemingly every decade, there's like, oh, this thing exists. Stock art exists. Like, why should I start being an illustrator? There's stock art. People can just buy a piece of stock and use that.
Yeah.
But careers.
Well, I think we're looking at that with AI right now, and I think that this is a definite shift, as something that theoretically, at least, is a real threat to picture making.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we want to go down that rabbit hole or not, but I feel I have very strong feelings about the degradation of both the artist and the viewer of art that AI brings to the table. But you're right. I mean, I think that in many ways this too shall pass because history has shown that art overcomes these things, and
that's my position.
Yeah.
This podcast is produced by the Illustration Department, a global leader in online education for illustrators. Visit illustrationdept.com for offerings like mentorships and portfolio reviews, testimonials, our alumni showcase, our best-selling Substack, and more. That's illustrationdept.com. And now, back to our conversation. Now, we should talk about generative AI because you and I are absolutely on the same page. It's the worst. It's not magic. It's not neat. It is to art what plastic fruit is to nutrition.
Yes.
I suspect there are one or two illustrators listening to this who think I and you and other concerned creative types should stop complaining about it. We're being chicken littles. I mean, should we just shut up about it, or should we maybe, keep talking about it?
I'm not going to shut up about the things that I feel strongly about. Maybe nobody wants to listen to it, but I feel that, as I say, it's. I think it really degrades, in a lot of ways. More importantly, it degrades the experience for viewers because it kind of dumbs a culture down.
Exactly.
I think there are certain things. I'm politically probably a little to the left of Karl Marx, but I think the democratization of everything is not a good idea. That
right.
There's a set of skills that you develop that they exercise your brain and develop sides of you that are really important and valuable and bring something to the table and give service to the world you live in too. Mm-hmm. And you're missing all of that. You're missing all of that by keywording in imagery. Mm-hmm. And so, at least now, and the argument I think is that it's growing exponentially in its skill set, this machine, and at some point this won't be the case. But to me, I immediately recognize it. It's soulless, and aside the digital flaws of like 6 fingers or whatever is one problem, but it's the soullessness of it.
Sure.
It kind of going back to what we were talking about before, that when you do a piece that your heart's in, everybody feels it.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at a piece of art for which there is no heart because it's been created by something that doesn't have a heart, you feel that too.
It's just like anything else. It's like music. It's like hearing you and me talk right now. Yeah. Right now, we're both calm and talking. We could be angry. Yep. We could be happy. Those feelings behind the words make the words matter more. If it's a robot talking to you, I don't care how well it mimics anger, you'll never feel it. You'll hear it as anger, but you won't feel it as anger. And that's the difference.
Yes.
In AI art, you'll see it, you won't feel it. And you won't even see it either.
And what a tragic world where you're having, an argument with a computer.
And also, why to people who not to the creators, not to the people who are using generative AI, because I've yelled at them enough, and I'll continue to yell at them. But it's to the people who are accepting this. Like, why do you want fake stuff? Don't you want real things in your life, like real art?
I think the argument always seems to come back to the speed and efficiency and time not wasted on tasks that are useless. And I think that art is all about wasting time and sort of going down rabbit holes and exploring spaces.
Right.
I've been doing this for a long time. I still don't have a formula for how to solve a problem. Every time I go out there, I'm on a tightrope, and I'm not sure if I'm going to fall off. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I've got the certainty in my mind that I'm going to find my way. But how I find my way it happens new every time. That's what I love about it. I don't want to press a button and get that solution.
No, I don't use it for a damn thing. I don't use it for my notes for this podcast.
Good.
I could use ChatGPT or whatever the hell to put together an outline of notes for you. I'm talking to Marc Burckhardt. Can you give me a couple of questions, this and that? And then I could build off of that and quote unquote make it my own, which is bullshit, by the way.
Yes.
No, I'm writing these notes, and it took me days to write the notes for you. I started off with thinking you and I would go one way, and as I was writing my notes, because this is the way the brain works, things started opening up, like ideas of, oh, wait, maybe I should talk to Marc about this, and let me write that down. So the notes I have now weren't the notes I had before. That's because it's all human-made. Same goes with creativity, music.
That's how you make art too.
Food, everything, everything. Anyway. Yeah,
so I actually my best buddy, a good friend for many, many years in Austin. Everybody I knew when I lived in New York was an artist, and when I moved to Austin, everybody was suddenly an electrical engineer. And my best buddy is a very, very successful tech guy. He's got a startup, which appears that it's going to be very successful too, and artificial intelligence is a significant part of it. And so we've had a lot of disagreements about these issues and discussed it at length. But we were at a dinner last time I was in Austin a couple of months ago, and so he's, in order to, I guess, sort of prove the efficiency of it, he said, well, Marc Burckhardt, give me 10 examples of Marc Burckhart's work. I think he used, what's the one that the Chinese one that sort of disrupted everything recently.
I know you're referring to. I can't.
You know what I'm talking about. But he used that one, and it came up with 10 examples of my work listed with their names, and not a single one of them exists. Not one out of those 10 existed. And I was like, okay, there's the answer to your, Yeah. So I have my feelings about it, and like a lot of things in the world, it will probably ignore my opinions and continue on its own momentum.
I don't know. I think it's important. I think I'm just going to keep seeding the conversation with anti-AI stuff, and
good. And I think there's
some shit will grow from it.
A lot of other really amazing artists, good friends, have made much bigger efforts than I have, but we've tried to, for example, hold the various competitions to their feet to the fire a little bit to make sure that AI is not a part of what's drawn into the body of work, and I think that's important to do. These are fights that we should all be having.
To that point, you've been a part of collectives, coalitions, and other such groups of creatives for a variety of reasons. That included, holding competitions accountable, advocating for protecting an artist's intellectual property. I mean, it's what led to the formation of Icon.
Yep.
Okay, so people are listening to us going like, we get it, guys. We're with you on this. What can we do about it?
I think we have to continue to do those kinds of the very things. So I was an attendee at the first illustration conference. I ended up being the president of the board of the second illustration conference, and that was all about copyright. At that point, the stock industry had more or less consumed the photography industry. It was threatening to do the same to illustrators. And we had, companies like iStock that were paying artists pennies on the dollar for secondary rights. And it was a huge threat. And it was collective action. It was really a collective action in the sense of making artists, aware of what the value of their work was and aware of what the threat was, and to begin to think about how you approach that problem. Mm-hmm. There were, the various proposals that were made, and some of them, never really came to fruition. But the end result was that the industry became very conscious of the fact that we were our own threats in some ways. Our acceptance of that system would undermine us. And I think that we need to be aware of that in this case too, that, it's about educating other people as well. And I think, great art directors understand that, but great art directors are like great artists. They're not necessarily born, they are created through exposure and knowledge and understanding of what we do.
Right.
And so I think it's making sure that we talk to each other, which is a really hard thing to get artists to do, because going back to what I was talking about before, we'd spend a lot of time sitting in rooms by ourselves. So it's very easy to not, and I think this is a huge mistake on a lot of different levels that artists can make, is to sort of see each other as competition. And I don't see any other artist as someone I'm in competition with. No. Mm-hmm. If you're doing something genuine and that's you're not competing with anybody else.
Exactly.
You're competing with yourself.
Exactly.
But at the same time, it's really important to recognize your community and be in touch with people, and there's in so many ways in which that enriches your life and will reduce your anxiety about what you do, and the finding that listening to this podcast, and hearing this common thread that runs through artists' experience, that all of that stuff is so important and so valuable, and I think that's the way you have to approach problems like this too.
Again, back into my psyche where I feel like I need to apologize and feel like I'm going to get in trouble. Someone's going to hear this and yell at me on social media or something. So I'm just going to say this. I'm not attacking in a what am I trying to say? I'm pointing out with love. I'm not, I don't want to come across like I'm sort of underhandedly attacking other illustrators who are like, AI is not that bad. People can think whatever they want to think. I'm just saying, like, for those of us who are in our camp, I would suggest kindly and professionally to maybe point out to those who are like, oh, what's the big deal? Point out to them what the big deal is. It's literally theft.
Absolutely.
Full stop. Just end there. It's theft. It's theft.
Yes.
What else do we have to say about it?
It's absolutely, it's theft, and I think what can happen, what unfortunately happens in a lot of ways in people's lives is they may get to a point, or they maybe feel like they have to get to a point in order to stay sane, where they ask themselves, well, is this issue affecting me personally? And if it's not, then, how much energy can I give to it? I'm just going to relax and not worry about it. My career is in a good spot. I'm, established, or I'm, maybe heading to the point of, I don't know, whatever, where it doesn't impact you. So you think, oh, it's not such a big deal. In that sense, artists are all about doing an individual thing. I think if you're doing it well, you're pursuing something that is a very unique and individual vision. But we are also a community. Recently, I found myself, I do this a lot, sort of go down rabbit holes of interest, and I somehow fell into Schopenhauer and his work about color theory. But then, philosophically, he was also an advocate of interior happiness, coming from being part of a community and being part of your society, rather than like Nietzsche, pursuing the individual. And I think it's really true. And when it comes to art making, yes, this may not be a threat to you, but it doesn't take a lot of abstract thinking to realize what a threat this is to the act of art making generally.
Right.
And so that ought to offend you just from that standpoint.
Exactly. Well, speaking of happiness and anxiety,
Yes.
There's a romantic notion, you said, that art is just pure joy expressed on a canvas when you're not using AI. As you rightfully point out, that's not really the case. It is frustrating. Bullshit. It is hard. And it's definitely pressure-packed.
Yeah.
I've talked to, countless illustrators who feel pressure from family members, husbands, other partners who expect you to make money.
Of course.
They pressure. There's as an illustrator, there's pressure to find work, pressure to keep up with the Joneses on social media, pressure to find your voice, get it right artistically.
Pressure for your time.
All right. So where do you find the most pressure personally? And what would you say to illustrators who are just feeling pressure from all sides?
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, I have to admit that I think, most illustrators, successful illustrators, are a little bit adrenaline junkies in that respect because, it's not a job where it's the opposite of, sitting around and going, this is just the greatest. Everything is so much fun and so easy. It's constantly that tightrope walk and that, oh shit, am I going to screw this up? Right.
Mark, I feel with the podcast, man. I say some shit. I said some shit today that I'm kind of like, oh man, am I going to get in trouble? All right. You know what? Bring it on. Bring it on. Oh God. Am I afraid of it? No, I'm not afraid of it. Yes, I am. Yeah. A little adrenaline.
Yeah. And you're not doing good stuff if you're not in that space,
right,
in a lot of ways. I mean, sometimes I think it's, Willie Nelson said, when asked, where the songs come from, he's like, I feel like I'm a radio transmitter, sometimes the signal comes in, right? But you got to build the tower and you got to be tuned in and you got to be listening through all the static, to get that song. That's where the anxiety comes from. And then, sometimes it just flows right into you. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the nature of it. And that's okay. I think that's the main thing. This is sort of slightly tangential kind of anxiety, but just the anxiety that comes from you're working and you've got the anxiety of getting that project done and doing it well. And then you finish that project and you're like, oh shit, am I ever going to work again? Mm-hmm. Right. So there's always some kind of anxiety that at a certain point you will come to peace with. It doesn't go away. You just come to a kind of peace with it, mm-hmm, that it's part of the package. And that's the best advice I could give anyone about it, is that it's supposed to be this way. You know?
Yeah. And this pressure changes depending on where you are with your career.
Yeah. It's the signal that you're doing it right.
Right.
You know, if you were just banging out work and everything was easy and a joy, you're not doing it right.
Agreed.
It's not supposed to work that way. It's supposed to be something that's heartfelt and where you are intellectually and spiritually engaged.
Right. And then when you unlock something or you solve a problem that was, previously perceived as impossible to solve, the joy there is hard to describe.
Absolutely.
Especially when you see it, when you're talking to other, like if you're teaching and you're talking to an illustrator and you point something out and you're talking about, if you go this way or that way, then this happens and that happens. And you can literally see it in their eyes. You can see oh my God, I get it now. Or I feel it too. Sometimes I will put together something, I don't know, like I'll start writing for Substack and I won't know where I'm going. And that's it. That's the end of my writing. For 20 minutes, I'm just like flailing at words and nothing's clicking. And then the next day I wake up and come at it going like, well, I don't know. We'll see what happens. And then all of a sudden it's an hour later and I have to stop because I have to like take a shower and get ready for work.
Right.
So it just depends. And then when it unlocks, you're like, God, this feels great. This is earned joy.
Absolutely.
And that's why, maybe don't mask the pressure. Don't try and hide the anxiety. Just it's there. And it makes the joys even more precious.
I agree completely with you. And I think that the trick is, I think most artists would tell you that they've got the anxiety part down.
Yeah.
It's the joy in the peace part that they're trying to find. And I think, it's striking that balance. It's sort of recognizing, and I think for me at least, part of it is coming to some peace with the idea that it's okay to be anxious, and it's okay to be, not sure how this is going to work out. That is in the very nature of what we do. Mm-hmm. When you grasp that and just sort of go, okay, I'm feeling what some people might think is panic, but that's normal. That means I'm doing it right. That can help you all by itself be less panicky.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's good advice or makes any sense at all, but it
makes sense to me, and it's my podcast, so we're going to move on, and I will not edit it out. What last word of advice or encouragement would you like to share with illustrators listening to this? Maybe some of them are feeling a little doubtful. Maybe they want to get into editorial or books or packaging or galleries or what have you. What would you want to say to them, from you to them?
There's a lot of work out there. There's a lot of possibilities out there. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to know where your work fits in the world. It's getting your work first. That's the thing that you ought to be focusing on. And then if you're going, those markets will find you. If you put yourself out there. It's kind of what we were just talking about, this idea of the anxiousness. It's, well, the other way of describing it, I think, for me is, I think if you stand out in the rain long enough, you're going to get hit by lightning occasionally. Maybe not the most positive metaphor, but but I think the people that survive and do well in this field are people who are doing it because they love it and they can't help it. They're just persistent. And persistence is, I think, the key, particularly when you're beginning.
Oh, for sure.
And if you're obsessed, you're going to excel. That's not just advice for artists. I think that's I've seen that with my electrical engineer buddies. The guys who are at 2:00 in the morning on a Friday night, when we're drinking, are obsessively talking about chip design. Those guys are the best people in their field because they can't stop thinking about it. They love it. That's what talent is. Talent is not some pixie dust that's been spread on you that makes you a great artist. It's no kid draws like Michelangelo, right? You develop your skills and you develop the people who follow those skills and believe in those skills too by persistence and obsession.
To learn more about Marc, visit marcburckhardt.com. If you find value in this podcast, you can support it by subscribing to my best-selling Substack. For $5 a month or $50 a year, you will access hundreds of articles on the art, practice, and history of illustration, unlock bonus podcast episodes called Extra Credit, and connect with other members of the ID community. Join me on Substack by visiting illustrationdept.substack.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.
Did you know 39% of teen drivers admit to texting while driving? Even scarier, those who text are more likely to speed and run red lights. Shockingly, 94% know it's dangerous, but do it anyway. As a parent, you can't always be in the car, but you can stay connected to their safety with Greenlight Infinity's driving reports. Monitor their driving habits, see if they're using their phone, speeding, and more. These reports provide real data for meaningful conversations about safety. Plus, with weekly updates, you can track their progress over time. Help keep your teens safe. Sign up for Greenlight Infinity at greenlight.com/podcast.